You're listening to a Frequency Podcast Network production.
He's in the building!
Drink the moment. Drink it.
I said, empty your mind.
Coquettish and coy. Ow. Ow.
What?
And there's people that are dying.
The wickedly talented.
More than great. It was historic.
Crack is world.
Oh, good for you.
I have to apologize.
One of the hottest.
Hello, and welcome back to The Reheat, a podcast that re-examines the hottest celebrity news and scandals of yesteryear and asks, how would we react to the same events if they'd transpired today? I'm your co-host, Sarah Sahagian.
And I'm Sadaf and Sarah, your other co-host. And in today's episode, we're going to flash back to just a decade ago when one of the most infamous Hollywood affairs happened between, of course, Kristen Stewart and director Rupert Sanders, whose name you likely didn't know before, and I'm willing to bet don't know now. This, of course, all went down while she was dating her Twilight co-star, Robert Pattinson, when the two were one of the most beloved and hounded couples of the time. Sarah, how do you register this particular scandal in your mind? What was different about this affair?
It blew my mind because of the level of photographic evidence.
Yes.
To me, that felt unprecedented. And also, I don't want to be judgmental, but I was just sort of like, but why would famous people let that happen? They're super rich. They could afford a hotel room. Like, this is the kind of sloppy cheating you do if you don't have resources, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But I also remember how much she was slut-shamed. And
Yeah.
as much as I think that they both should have been smart enough to book a hotel room, no one deserves to be slut-shamed.
No, don't even couples who are having an affair deserve to go outside and spread their love and just let it get some air, Sarah. You know, I have sympathy for them. No, I don't. Okay, before we take a closer look at that scandal, let's get to know Kristen Stewart a little bit better. So she was born in LA to parents in the business. Her mom is a director and her dad is a producer. So she essentially grew up on film sets and dreamed of being a director or a writer. She was given her first acting role in one of her mom's films. But I would argue that she truly became an actor with her third film, David Fincher's Panic Room in 2002. Such a good movie. And she shot that when she was just 10 years old. She said since that it was one of her easiest projects because she was so young and there wasn't a whole lot of thinking that went into the performance, which I am sorry to say explains a lot about her acting since then. But we will come back to that. She co-starred alongside Jodie Foster, who played her mother. And I think it's also fair to say she's mirrored her career a bit. Their styles are so similar. They even look the same. Now, from there came the film Speak, Zathura, Into the Wild, Jumper, really an assortment of offbeat independent movies. At the time, she was also dating her Speak co-star, Michael Angarano, from 2005 to 2009. Sarah, what do you remember of Kristen's early era?
I wasn't really aware of her at that time. She wasn't a name to me. I did see Into the Wild and I did see Jumper, but I guess she didn't stand out for me. I don't know why. I
Ouch.
don't remember her. I don't want to be mean to Kristen Stewart. Like, I don't want to say she was forgettable.
You're being honest.
I'm just being honest that for whatever reason, she wasn't a screen presence that really resonated with me before the media told me I should care. And that was when she was cast in Twilight.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah, I remember her in Panic Room and I remember her in Speak, both great movies. But yeah, tough to say that her performances now are quite as good as they were then. I've just never really been a fan of her acting. I think it's struggle acting, but you know, we're in a minority with that. Then came Twilight. In 2008, the disturbingly popular YA novels and borderline softcore erotic fanfiction, whatever you want to call it, was adapted into a series of 6 movies, building a multi-billion-dollar franchise that would not rest or give us a break for the next 5 years. These movies earned a total box office of over $3 billion and broke theater records. It catapulted Kristen and Rob into mega fame. If you have somehow and mercifully managed to avoid them, here's a simple synopsis. Kristen plays Bella, an unusually basic human being who smells very good to Empire Edward, played by Rob. Edward, by the way, has the ability to sparkle. Please look that up if you have the time. I just wanted to note that. Now, like every generation has their smutty vampire novels, so I kind of get it in that sense. This one just took it in a unique direction and was massive catnip for the fangirls. It quickly became clear just how intense the fan base was when Kristen was cast, setting off bloggers everywhere who were waiting to find out who would become their Bella and Edward. She disappointed many, but once the initial movie hit theaters, she also won a ton more fans to the point where she and Rob were on every magazine cover. This was also despite the pair's remarkably horrific acting. Again, my opinion. I can't forget this one scene Tumblr loved to throw around at the time. And yes, I frequented Tumblr at the time. In that scene, Bella slips and falls on the sidewalk, but Kristen's face does not budge an inch. You wouldn't even know she'd hurt herself. It drives me insane. As USA Today critiqued at the time, her performance was, quote, wooden and a blank. No matter. These films were not about acting, despite how often Kristen would defend them. It made more sense to follow Rob's lead as he would mock it himself, I think. Sarah, what did you make of the franchise? And did you read the books?
I did not read the books.
Oh, thank God. I would have had to reevaluate this friendship.
No, I didn't. I was aware of them because I was an avid watcher of shows like Entertainment Tonight. So I knew that they were making these movies and that they were based on books. But I remember going to Indigo and looking at like the book jacket and, you know, reading the synopsis and being like, the fuck? I didn't even pay to see these movies in the theater. I literally watched the first one on a plane. I was coming home from grad school for, I forget which break, but for a holiday break. And I just sort of thought, well, I should watch it. And then the 65-year-old man beside me also decided to watch it because his daughter had mentioned it. And he, for some reason, thought that it was Oscar bait and not like a really terrible genre movie. And he was just like, I'm so baffled why everyone is saying that this movie is a masterpiece. I'm like, oh, sir, that I don't think most people are saying that.
Except the fangirls. But I'm with you because I felt like I should see it. I wanted to be a part of the conversation. And I was like, how can I judge this if I haven't seen it? I think I managed to watch the whole thing over like 5 years, just in bits and pieces. There was one that I watched in total. And here's my excuse. I was reviewing it for the school newspaper. Okay, so.
Likely story.
The truth. And it's funny because I remember because I went to the screening by myself and I was surrounded by these fans who'd won tickets to the screening and they were all wearing Rob and Kristen t-shirts. And this was years ago. So I was like, wow, I'm being a voyeur to this experience really because I was not a part of it in that way. For me, it was Harry Potter at the time. Like that was everything. So I understand the fan love.
Yeah.
I just kind of wish the material had been even slightly better. I don't know.
There should have been more fantasy and like world building or just more sex.
Yeah.
Like it was neither enough of an interesting world like Harry Potter nor like smutty enough like 50 Shades of Grey to be interesting to me. Like I don't understand who this was the sweet spot for. But I mean, some people liked it and good for them. Good for them.
What I would have given just to hand some Anne Rice over to these people and be like, it can get hotter.
Yeah.
Like
sexier vampires.
So
sexier
much.
vampires.
Oh my God.
Anne Rice, yeah.
Yeah. Now, there are always YA stars that define a generation. We've talked about this so much. And we know teen girls are an incomparable fan base. We were them. Do you feel like because of all of that, Rob and Kristen were kind of just a part of that formula?
Yeah. I mean, I know every generation likes to think that they are special and unique, but no generation really is truly an original generation in terms of these things, like in being fans.
Yeah.
I was a super fan of Dawson's Creek.
Oh, yeah. Good one.
Which is bad in a different way. Like it's a teen drama that is just as overwrought and the acting is probably just as bad, but you learned a lot of SAT words.
Some of the acting was really good. But yes, I did learn a lot of vocabulary from there. It was so good. So yeah, I mean, I totally agree. Like we had our people. We saw the way things happened. It's just natural, I think, when you're a fan at that age, that you become so fascinated and so enamored by this fantasy that you're seeing play out in front of you that you want it to be real. I mean, it's sort of like when you read a book and you just see the characters continuing on their lives after you get to the last page. If it's a movie you're watching with real actors playing them, the next best fantasy is, oh my God, are they together in real life? So it's interesting. I remember being the age of Twilight fans and fantasizing about Justin Timberlake and Britney Spears getting together and praying at night that they'd become a couple. Of course they did, and I lost my shit. I regret all that now because, like, you're Brad Pitt. I don't have a lot of good things to say about Justin Timberlake. But I don't know. It's complicated because it was such a fun time in fandom. Naturally, it doesn't surprise me then that Kristen and Rob got together during the franchise's peak and fans lost their shit. And also, I have to say, I'm not surprised that they got together. I think a lot of the time in films and in TV shows when the characters do have that chemistry, it's probably there in real life.
Did they have chemistry?
It's a good question. I don't have much to judge by. I don't know. I mean, they were both so fucking awkward. Like, their acting skill was on par. Wood against wood.
Yes. Neither one was a good performer at that age. That could have a bit to do with inexperience and being young. It could also be a general lack of talent. Like, I don't want to be too much of a hater. Like,
also, it could just be becoming famous at the same time, right?
Yeah.
And to the same level, and you bond over that. You're really the only two people who can bond over that at that point. Just pushes you together. You're doing press tours. You're doing 6 fucking movies. You're together all the time. Seems honestly just like a good idea. Like, might as well.
It's convenient, right?
It's convenient.
It's like how when you are in university, you typically date someone who lives in your residence or someone in your group of friends. These are not necessarily people you want to date, but they're there, right? Like, people who are there just become more attractive because you don't have to get on the subway to see them, right?
That's
if
so
I don't
true.
have to take an Uber to your house, you are at least like twice as hot as you otherwise would be.
That's so perfectly put. Exactly. Now, these two played a couple in the most popular movies of the time. We've established that. So it makes sense when they became one in real life, those who love Bella and Edward would love and clamor for more Kristen and Rob. It was kind of like a dream, I feel like, for these fans. Cameras followed them everywhere they went. Fans tried to lip read their every conversation. Rumors flew about whether they were having children or if they were engaged. It was buzzy as hell. I remember this too. But like Justin and Brittany, the two rarely acknowledged they were together despite being on press tours and constantly being asked about their relationship. Here is Kristen talking about that period of her life with Howard Stern in 2019.
I have this fear that people would assume that maybe I'm like, you know, it's kind of attention, like, oh, cool, you're still like pushing that narrative or whatever. It's like, no, I've actually never been allowed to just say what happened.
Right.
Because I was so self-conscious about seeming like an attention seeker, like somebody who was like trying to...
Or taking advantage
exactly.
of the fact that you guys were dating and stuff.
People, I mean, we were together for years. That was like my first,
love.
Yeah, I mean, like, I was super in love with my high school boyfriend, super, super fucking in love with him. But me and Rob were like a little older and it was just like, gong. But...
He's a charming guy.
He's the best.
He's really...
He's the best.
So here's my question. When celebrity couples choose to hide, are they sort of just adding fuel to the fire?
Yes. Here's the thing. I don't know if they were trying intentionally to add fuel to the fire so they would get more paparazzi attention and then become even more famous. Or if they were just so young and naive that they legitimately thought this was the way to stay under the radar. Like, it obviously diffuses the tension that you have with your fan base if you just acknowledge that you're together and you give them the odd shot of you two as a couple, right? Like, that is probably the smartest strategy to give the people what they want in moderation. But these are also really young people who, like, I don't know how sophisticated their media strategy was. Like, it could also just be that they were taking a really obnoxiously principled stance that you often do when you're young, being like, it's our private business, so I'm not going to acknowledge it, even though in the long run that might have been better. Like, when you're young, you're so principled in my opinion, but like, I mean, I really was, but in a really, really obnoxious way that didn't serve me.
That was just you, Sarah. I wish that I had been more.
No, my worldview was super Manichean.
I believe it.
So I could see them just doing that because they're like, this is what the right thing to do is. But like, no, it's not the right thing to do if it doesn't work.
It's sort of like when Mindy Kaling had a child and she didn't say how that child came into this world and by whom. that is her right. Yeah. And she should completely protect her privacy. I think that's great. But it did end up having us all, even now, years later, wondering, who is it? What happened? And we're still dying to know.
Yeah. I still want to know. I shouldn't want to know. Like, it's none of my business. Yeah. But I would pay, like...
We would pay good money. We would put our money together.
I was going to say I'd pay $50. And I'm like, Sarah, be honest. I'd pay $250. Like, if you tell me, I'd pay a good chunk of change.
I'd match that and I would sign an NDA.
Oh, I would sign an NDA too. Like, Mindy, if you're listening, please reach out to us because we will sign we will sign anything you want and we will give you money.
Yes. We'll pay you for this.
I mean, you're rich. You don't need our money, but we'll give you money or I'd babysit for free. I have a kid. I'd be a good babysitter.
She doesn't want us near her children after that, but I agree. Now, over the next 4 years, Kristen wouldn't just stick to Twilight smartly. She was also in comedies like Adventureland, music films like The Runaways, and dramas like On the Road. Her star continued to build, particularly as her relationship with Rob stayed strong and his career also took off. In 2011, Forbes even named her Hollywood's best actor for the buck. In 2012, Kristen took on the role of Snow White in the film Snow White and the Huntsman, co-starring Charlize Theron and Chris Hemsworth. It was her first big budget project outside of Twilight, and so there was a lot writing on it. Although critical reception was mixed, it did incredibly well at the box office, pulling in a massive $830 million worldwide. Kristen officially became the world's highest paid actress, banking $34.5 million that year alone. Damn. But then, scandal broke in July 2012 when Kristen was spotted in a few compromising positions with her Snow White director, Rupert Sanders. Us Weekly dropped a bomb one summer afternoon with a series of photos showing the two making out and in each other's arms in their car, and then seemingly grinding by a guardrail and just continuing to generally canoodle, which is a word we should use more often. What was fascinating about these photos is how undeniable the infidelity was. Here is the toughest part. Yes, Kristen was in a relationship with Rob at the time, but Rupert was married to model Liberty Ross, and the pair shared 2 young children. Making matters even wilder was that Liberty played Kristen's mother in the movie. That's the toughest fact. He was 41, she was 22. As one photographer reportedly said, quote, "It seemed like they couldn't get enough." Sarah, take me back to what you wore on this day, what you had for lunch, what you drank in your toast to them all later that evening. Take us back.
Well, it was 2011, so I was definitely wearing skinny jeans with a scarf and probably a plaid shirt.
Love it.
It was a really delicious piece of celebrity gossip.
Oh,
and
right word.
Just like the photographic evidence. I remember the Lainey gossip coverage of it, which was, I mean, so granular because everyone wanted to know every little detail. You combined the fact that the Twilight fans were crestfallen. Like, they were devastated.
Yeah.
With the fact that this transcended Twilight, right? Because she was, by this point, such a big star. So everyone was talking about it. Some people were very emotionally invested. Other people kind of thought it was funny, or worse yet, slut-shamed her. I think I probably thought it was funny. And in retrospect, that was really insensitive of me because she was getting slut-shamed and she was such a young person. Like, celebrity gossip is fun, but like this got really nasty really quickly. And also it did ruin a marriage. And, you know, Rupert Sanders had children. So like, he's the biggest asshole here. He was 41 and had kids.
Yeah, I think this is where I get really stuck because here's the thing. We know that she's an incredibly private person. Like, not just with her relationships, but in every way. So then here is one of the, as we've said, one of the most exposed affairs we have ever seen. Like, good Lord, there's no room for question. So that's really interesting to me. Because also what I remember at the time was just extreme shock. Because again, she had not admitted to being in a relationship with Rob yet. So here this comes out. I was just so glued to it. I think I was just so fascinated because this kind of scandal is the kind that we don't get in our time anymore. No, it's so rare. I felt like, God bless that I am alive in this time, that I get to see this, that we get to talk about it now. I mean, it's just incredible. But yes, all these people are hurt in the situation and it's terrible. So it's levels to this scandal. Here's another thing that I'm wondering. How the hell did this happen with Us Weekly? Because again, this never happens now. We never get to see something where a paparazzi manages to capture undeniable evidence. And then the magazine had very carefully packaged everything, put it out in the middle of the day. They had it in the magazine. They had it online. Yep. How did this happen?
And most magazines today wouldn't be brave enough to jeopardize a relationship with one of the biggest stars by doing this.
That's a good point.
As much as like, I don't want to like glorify people for publishing images like this that are really invasive, but it takes balls to do that.
It does, but you're so right, because I do think now, I would maybe say in the last 2 decades or so, tabloids are more defined for having a relationship with celebrities and organizing photo reveals like of a baby or of a wedding, rather than being like, hey, we caught them doing this, here, exposed. No one really does that anymore. I think maybe the Daily Mail is our key exception. We don't have News of the World anymore. The Sun is not what it used to be. It's very different. And I do think in larger picture, that's a great thing, because that was terrible. And they brought down so many women for things that they never should have. I mean, talk about slut-shaming. Those tabloids used to do it all the time. So it's a good thing. But I think as people who just enjoy trashy celebrity news, it's a sad thing, but ultimately good.
The most fun I ever had reading Lady Gossip, and I've had lots of fun over the years reading Lady Gossip, but the most fun was this scandal. Like, was her dissecting this scandal.
I just remember being on blogs, being on Twitter, just reading everything I could take in. Oh my God. Now, needless to say, if we've learned anything by now, it's this. Kristen, as the woman and the younger individual in the relationship, was roundly slut-shamed. Many fans denounced her for breaking Rob's heart, while others insisted the photos were shopped. I would now like to share a clip from a video made by perhaps the most dedicated Twilight fan of all time, who goes by Nutty Madam on YouTube now. I know, it's cute. It's cute. The clip is titled, "How Could You Do This, Kristen?" in all caps. Here's a brief bit of it.
I said I wasn't going to make a video about this because I didn't want it to be true, because I thought that it was just photoshopped, and I thought it wasn't real, and I thought they're just making it up because they don't want it to be real. But I've just gone on PerezHilton.com, and Kristen's released a statement admitting to it and saying that she actually did cheat on him and saying that she's sorry, like that makes it okay.
Lots of ironies in that video there. I just want everybody to know that Rob is okay. Okay, he survived this.
He's fine. He's fine.
And by the way, in my favorite part of this entire scandal is photos being snapped of him packing up his things outside his house with Kristen, throwing them into his truck, and dramatically driving away just days after the affair went public. He stayed temporarily at Reese Witherspoon's Ojai Ranch. Fun fact, as they were shooting Water for Elephants at the time. The movie really writes itself. I mean, there's so many fun parts to all this. But that is also what you call a luxury breakup, getting to go hide at Reese Witherspoon's Ojai Ranch. Good for you, Rob.
I would break up with my partner, too, if I got to go hang out at Reese's Ojai Ranch. Like, I'm sorry, that's my fantasy.
Yes.
That ranch must be so
Oh
nice.
my God, yes. If Nutty Madam knew that Rob got to stay there, she wouldn't be so worried. It would be fine. Now, Rob became the wronged hero, of course, the heartbroken sweetheart. It was Kristen's name that occupied headlines over Rupert's, which in a way made sense. She was the much, much, much bigger name. Oglers started coming out of the woodwork, claiming they'd seen her, quote, leaning on Rupert at a cafe months before, suggesting the two were madly in love, and it was all a scheme to fame. As for Liberty, she tweeted a simple, wow, moments after the story came out, and then deactivated her Twitter account. She also, in a very delicious move, posted a photo on Instagram later of a drunken Snow White with the caption, "Not so pretty or so pure after all." Oof.
Okay. All right.
In an interesting and ironic turn, a day after the photos were published, Kristen released a surprisingly emotional press statement, and it marked the first time she directly acknowledged she and Robert had been a couple. She wrote, quote, "I'm deeply sorry for the hurt and embarrassment I've caused those close to me and everyone this has affected. This momentary indiscretion has jeopardized the most important thing in my life, the person I love and respect the most, Rob. I love him. I love him. I'm so sorry." Now, Rupert released his own statement saying, quote, "I am utterly distraught about the pain I have caused my family. My beautiful wife and heavenly children are all I have in this world. I love them with all my heart. I am praying that we can get through this together." Sarah, how could Kristen do this to Rob?
She's 22. I am a firm believer that, listen, your brain is still developing until you're 25. So I think that good people who might mature into steadfast, faithful partners, even those people can cheat at 22. And it's not that it doesn't count. It's that I think it's a different category of cheating. I don't think it's like what Rupert did, where he was married. His brain was fully developed. He was a grown-ass man in his 40s, right? I think that when you're in your 20s and this guy you idolize because he's your boss, he's this director, and he's giving you validation and telling you're a good actress. I mean, I'm just assuming these are the types of things he said. I think that maybe that's the kind of attention that you feel like you crave. You want his approval, and listen, she has never said that she felt that he abused the power imbalance there. So I don't want to put words in her mouth and make this a Me Too issue when she's never said that. And I do actually believe that if she truly thought that it was a Me Too issue, she'd say something, because she is a pretty political person. So maybe she doesn't see it that way, even though I still think it's completely inappropriate and not okay. But I think it's easy to get seduced by someone who is the kind of person whose approval you want. And definitionally, when you're an actress, you want a director's approval.
It's not that crazy to believe that this happened or how it happened. And she was on a set where Rob was not there. And what they were so used to was being together all the time. Here's something where she's out on her own and she's got this guy. Listen, he's also not a bad looking guy. I'm sorry to say it. Okay, Sarah doesn't agree. But anyway, besides the point, Sarah's very disgusted. Okay, well, here's what I find really interesting about all this. It completely reversed Kristen's principles. So not only was she out in the open with this man, but she revealed her love for Rob twice in this statement. I for all these years, sometimes I'll just be sitting there, I'll be washing a dish and I'll think, I love him. I love him. I can't forget it. Yeah. I'm just like, what happened that she got to that degree? Like, I think there's something to be said about that she felt like she had to apologize to such an open-hearted and deep, deep way, not just to Rob, but to the public.
I think he probably wasn't taking her calls. Like, I think she was probably trying to get a message to him through the media.
Good thought.
That's my speculation.
Ooh.
But I have no evidence of that. It could also be that she felt like she owed fans an explanation, that she knew that everyone had a parasocial relationship with them. But I doubt that that's what it is, because they were so private for so long. I don't think she cared whether fans were invested in their relationship. I think she was trying to demonstrate her devotion by prostrating herself in public. I think she just sort of thought, like, if I self-flagellate in a public forum, that will show him I'm really, truly sorry. And when you're young and you've made a mistake, that's the type of dramatic stuff you do, these grand gestures. Like, I do get it. I even though I was not a movie star at 22, I find it so easy to get into the headspace of what she was thinking.
Yeah. I remember thinking when I heard that statement, I feel for her. Like, she did get that out of me and I wasn't even a fan. So, you know, and a lot of fans did respond to it, I think, naturally. I mean, they finally got what they wanted, a confession. So anyway, now before we dig into the many more consequences of this very big scandal, I think this is the perfect time for a heavenly break, which is how Rupert described his marriage. We'll be right back. Now, another interesting look at all this is the way both victims of this affair began to experience media scrutiny. Weeks after the affair happened, Rob was joking and laughing about it with Jon Stewart on The Daily Show over pints of Ben and Jerry's, as one does. In fact, he and Kristen would get back together by that September, to the great relief of Nutty Madam, I'm sure. Well, Liberty literally fled the U.S. with her kids to her home in the U.K. to escape the attention. As Vanity Fair's Evgenia Peretz wrote in 2013 in a profile on the model, quote, "It was a perfect storm of humiliation. The particular choice of someone so young and famous as Mistress, whose demeanor almost defiantly announces, yeah, I'm bad news." This, of course, being a common archetypal dynamic in the media. We've talked about this so many times, villain versus heroine, good versus bad. But the thing is, Liberty comes off pretty great, not just in the profile, but in the way she handled the entire experience. She filed for divorce from Rupert, sought joint custody, and was freshly divorced by 2014. And by then, was dating record producer Jimmy Iovine, whom she would go on to marry in 2016 on Valentine's Day in a star-studded ceremony in California. Her modeling career was also reignited, and we love that for her. I just want Liberty to be happy. In the profile, she hilariously noted that when she was with Rupert, her career was rising high. She was posing for Burberry, Dior, and Chanel, and he was always chopped off in every picture with only his hand remaining. The family would call him the Hand. That was the joke. I mean, that's foreshadowing, if anything. My God. He was eager to have his moment, she said, and so they moved to LA. She added, quote, "I went from really the high end of it all, and then I'm living on a hilltop in Hollywood Hills breastfeeding. His career was such a thing in our lives. That's all we were here for, building, building, building." Here's my favorite part, which I think says a lot about celebrity and the relationships that are presented to us versus what is actually going on. Liberty said, quote, "I found myself on a roller coaster, like, I'm going to keep things moving, keep things going. I'm going to keep up this amazing facade. Everyone looking at me and Rupert thinking, oh, wow, you guys have it all. Really, I had times when I felt very lonely, very disconnected from Rupert. We lost our connection." Her brother, the Atticus Ross, called it, quote, "the worst mistake of Rupert's life."
As much as I do not think that the key actor here is the other woman, I do think, like, there is something especially upsetting about cheating with the husband of someone you know. Like, the fact that she worked with her, was a colleague, like, that's a much more personal betrayal. So I don't love that look on Kristen. I don't think she deserved the slut shaming, but I do think, like, I understand why Liberty was so devastated, because this is someone you've worked with. You know them. You're not faceless to them. You know that they know he has children with you and that you've sacrificed for him. Listen, men have been socialized, not all men, obviously, but throughout history, patriarchy has socialized men to kind of do their own thing and be a bit more self-centered. And women have been socialized to be nurturing and to, you know, keep the home fires burning. And so these traditional gender roles are very hard to shake, even for modern professional women like Liberty. And sometimes you fall into them without even realizing it. A lot of women have said this. This is a very common story where you're more powerful, you have more going on in your career, you marry a guy, and it starts to get to him. And so you decide to let him shine for a little while. But, now you have 2 kids in her case, and you've moved to a different city. And, you know, the modeling career you have, you've been out of it for a long time. How do you get it back? I mean, it turned out the way to get it back was to get into the newspapers by him cheating on you, but she didn't know that, right? So this is a very common story around the world where women have kids and sacrifice for their husbands. Then they're, you know, you think that letting your husband shine will be sufficient, but oftentimes a man who has a problem with a more powerful woman, it's not that he needs his moment to shine, it's that it's never enough attention, it's never enough validation. And that's why this didn't satisfy him being a big-time director. He had to go cheat with a much younger woman, right? Like, no amount of ego gratification was enough for this guy. And that's a very common story, but it's also very common for, you know, wives to, in many cases, to think that they can heal a man by being a good enough partner, and then to realize that you were never the problem.
Which is pretty much exactly what she says. I mean, God, gorgeously put, Sarah. But yeah, the only thing I want to add to that is that this is just a cold, hard reminder that these couples who look so beautiful and perfect and flawless, so like they've got it all on the outside, not so much. And I think we know that in real life, but it's always a really good reminder when we're looking at Hollywood. these pretty people. They have these 2 perfect looking kids. They're living in the Hollywood Hills. He's making a big budget blockbuster. Yeah, it's actually trash on the inside. And I think it's kind of amazing that this affair ended up being kind of what Liberty needed. I don't know if that's the right word, but as you said, like it got her career going again. She's with someone who she loves now and is a much better relationship. So I don't know. It's interesting the way that things turn out, but yeah. Now, in 2017, 5 years after the photos came out, Rupert said to Metro UK about the affair, quote, "Around every corner, there's something unexpected, and that's life. You just have to brush yourself off and continue moving forward the best you can. Everyone makes mistakes. I am bound to make more mistakes, and I wouldn't expect my life to be exciting if I didn't." Yikes. He then called the affair a, quote, "momentary lapse," for which he shouldn't continue to be punished because then he wouldn't be able to make movies, adding, quote, "If you took people off the table for a momentary lapse, there would be no one making art." So what art exactly did Rupert go on to make? Well, there was 2017's racially offensive Ghost in the Shell, and he directed the pilot of the recent Apple series Foundation, which is not that great. But other than that, zero art. Then, the summer after the scandal, Rob and Kristen would split for good, but things would only get better for the both of them otherwise. Rob, of course, has become a darling of all and is our new Batman, which is beyond wild to me. He would also go on to date FKA Twigs and now model Suki Waterhouse. And Kristen's star has risen alongside Robert's. Let's begin with her career. After the scandal, she took a year off from the spotlight and the screen, but when she came back, it was with a bang. Over the next 5 years, she starred in Clouds of Sils Maria, Still Alice, Certain Women, Personal Shopper. She worked with actresses like Juliette Binoche, Julianne Moore, Laura Dern, Michelle Williams, and directors Kelly Reichardt, Olivier Assayas, and Ang Lee. I mean, this is an amazing list. She also became the face of Chanel and was shot by Karl Lagerfeld in her first campaign. She directed a short. She officially was and is considered one of the best actors of her generation. And while I don't even remotely agree with that, it doesn't matter. Kristen is here to stay. Scandal be damned. By this time, rumors had long been flying around her sexuality. I'm not sure she was ever trying to hide the fact of her bisexuality, but she announced it to the world in a very memorable moment on Saturday Night Live in 2017. We were not spared her signature awkwardness, but she won tons of love for not only opening up, but also poking fun at Donald Trump.
So to be fair, I don't think Donald Trump hated me. I think he's in love with my boyfriend. Because he also tweeted this. Miss Universe 2012 pageant will be airing live on NBC and Telemundo December 19th. Open invite. Stands for Robert Pattinson. So yeah, that's crazy, right? The president is not a huge fan of me. But that is so okay. And Donald, if you didn't like me then, you're really probably not gonna like me now because I'm hosting SNL and I'm like so gay, dude.
Now, at the time, Kristen was dating producer Alicia Cargile and later was in a pretty publicized relationship with model Stella Maxwell, developing a reputation of allegedly overlapping love interests. Major emphasis on allegedly, but if you do a few deep dives on the right blogs, you'll get a clue. What is so fascinating about this part of Kristen's life is that she still has that very big fan base that's grown even stronger, and we can trace the way we discuss sexuality and the trajectory of her own rise to fame. Here's a clip of Kristen explaining that very point again on Howard Stern in 2019.
A friend of mine has a kid and she was like, hey, I asked my kid if he was like gay, but it was like in like the nicest, like sort of most, I was just curious. I just want to know him. I just want to be as close to him as I possibly can. And he's really young. And he is really self-possessed and very clearly already feels comfortable in a way that feels fluid and cool and kind of like you don't know where it's going to go. And he was like, this is child abuse. And I was like, it's true. It's like, you know, on some level, the sort of fervent question that was demanded of me for so long is now ridiculous.
Now, she goes on to say that no one should have to simplify their own experience in life to be more digestible to anyone else. And I think that's what's so impressive about Kristen's persona. She's had a very complicated experience in Hollywood, but she's pushed against that simplification again and again, and she's kept the fans and the fame, creating a model for others to do that too. You know, this is the same person who was told not to hold her girlfriend's hand in public or she wouldn't get a Marvel movie. But then she starred in Charlie's Angels, and now she has an Oscar nomination. person. So it's a real testament to kind of carving your own path, which she very much did. Sarah, what do you feel is different about the way that Kristen, quote unquote, came out? How did it change things?
I mean, I think she came out in a very millennial way, which was to say that she didn't owe anybody this answer, essentially, that her sexuality wasn't something that needed to be defined for public consumption. And I totally agree with that, right? I totally agree. And also, like, bisexuality is something that had been erased for a really long time. So the fact that she's now an out bisexual celebrity is great. Like, having more bisexual celebrities is really important for visibility. I think that everything she has done as an advocate for the queer community is fantastic. I think when she gets political, I really love her. I don't love her movies, please don't at me. But that doesn't mean that I don't appreciate her as a celebrity, because I think in her interviews, she's very articulate. I think she's very nuanced and reasonable. I kind of take issue with the fact that Howard Stern is the person she got this candid with. Like, pick a better interviewer, but like, whatever. No one's perfect.
Well, yeah, I agree too. I think this is someone who I actually don't think is all that talented in the medium that they've chosen. Again, that's just my opinion. But this is a good example of where I don't even think that matters. She has this huge platform. She knows she has all of these fans, and she's speaking up in this way that she doesn't have to, and she's chosen to. And I think it's made a huge difference. And that's not just for the people who are watching, but as we've said, creating a path for other people who want to follow. Now, as we've noted, not everyone, especially women, get to rebound quite like Kristen after a scandal like hers. Just look at where she is today. So she's nominated for that Oscar for playing Princess Diana and Pablo Lorraine Spencer. She's also taking on more fun projects, including 2019's Charlie's Angels and 2020's adorable Happiest Season, which is one of the few LGBTQ holiday rom-coms we've been treated to. She's also engaged to screenwriter Dylan Meyer. She's a fashion horse. She's suddenly a genius at handling press. When did that happen? And is exuding a comfort and authenticity we've seen not much of before. And her acting has legitimately kind of sort of gone maybe like a smidge better, like if I gave her that. And I think part of it is because she is a bit less awkward. She told Harper's Bazaar in 2019 that she actually finds that word violent and in the way that it's been used against her. And I guess that's fair. I mean, that really did become her persona for a long time. So it's nice to see that she's evolved past it. Sarah, I do want to ask you for your take on Spencer here, though, because this is the movie that everybody feels is her turning point as far as skill and talent goes. How do you feel about it?
Okay, I really wanted to like this movie. I saw it at a press screening at TIFF. I was super excited, not just because I was leaving my house, and that was pretty rare at that point of the pandemic, but I was actually looking forward to it. Physically, she looked a bit like Princess Diana, but I just didn't buy her performance, and perhaps the whole movie itself wasn't for me. As somebody who is an amateur historian of the royals. I'm not like a fangirl, but I am fascinated by them. And I mean, I'm probably as much of a Diana fangirl as anyone else. It's fine. It's okay to be a Diana fangirl. You're allowed to do that.
Yes.
I just felt like Emma Corrin's performance on The Crown set a really high bar, and that was still in my mind. And their performance, to me, really inhabited who Diana was, both publicly and presented a very believable version of what Diana would have been like privately.
Yeah.
And then I felt like with Kristen Stewart, part of what I felt like was the problem was I felt like Kristen was trying so hard to maintain the accent that she didn't get the rest of Diana's voice, right? Like, I'm trying to say I'm British, but I'm having a hard time getting the rest of her intonation and the way she sounds. I also just felt like I could see the work on her face, and I applaud her for trying so hard, but she didn't disappear to the character for me. It felt like she was straining. Yeah. And another thing that took me out was not her fault at all. It's the casting. It's that no one else looked anything at all like any of the royals. The guy who was cast as Prince Charles could not look less like Charles if he tried. Was that intentional? I don't know. It was like the casting director had never even seen a cover of Hello Magazine. Like, that's just what I have to say.
I think, listen, you're a Royals fan, so I think you're right. Maybe it wasn't meant for you. But I will say, I'm a big fan of this director, Pablo Larraín. And listen, I catch every Oscar-nominated movie before the show. I haven't watched this yet. I will. I'm sure I will. But I haven't because watching Kristen Stewart act puts me in physical pain. And I want to have a good time when I'm watching a movie. And I think what's interesting, though, because I have watched clips where I've thought, oh, that accent sounds shockingly good and impressive. But again, I haven't seen it. But what I want to pull from is the point that you made, which is that she's such a big star. She has been since she was in her late teens. It is so difficult to watch someone with that face that you've seen forever try to play someone as iconic as Princess Diana, that even if they're doing a good job, it's hard to tell. And I think part of the reason Emma Corrin is so good is because that's someone who we'd never seen before. This is maybe the case, but I don't know. I think it's interesting. I think we've also been primed to believe that no matter what Kristen Stewart takes on, it's going to be fucking amazing because she's Kristen Stewart. And I'm sorry, I don't actually subscribe to that, but that's okay. Again, that's just our opinion.
Yeah. If we're going to cast American actresses as Diana, I would have, like, of this generation, millennial American actresses, I probably would have cast Brie Larson, but that's just me.
Oh. Well, anyway, it'll be in the next one because there'll be many more to come, I'm sure. Now, in that Harper's profile, Kristen also says she's decided to enjoy her life instead of fixating on protecting it. And while I think that's worked well for her in terms of her personal and professional life, I think there's two sides to it. As she adds, quote, people get mad at you because you're in such a grand position. So if you don't hold that up, you don't deserve it. I never valued the fame thing as much as I valued the experiences I got to do while working. And it perplexed me so much. Some people were like, you ungrateful asshole. And I was like, yeah, completely. I don't want to be famous. I want to do my work. Now, this is where I always get tripped up by celebrity because I do think there's a choice here when it comes to fame. I do. I think especially when you're at this age where you know you have a massive fan base, you can check out of it if you want to. That's just a fact. Now, to illustrate my point, here's a clip of Kristen talking about this very thing on E! in 2016.
Genuinely, it's a weird contradiction, but my main goal in my life is to be seen. Yet I don't really love to adhere to the media frenzy. That's just sort of a business that's it's something different. But and I'm not scared of being looked at. It's kind of what we do.
Interesting. Now, there's no denying that leaning into fame, as Kristen has done in recent years, has benefited her. This is someone who avoided the press like the plague back in the day, and ahead of her Oscar nomination, attended every roundtable, interview, luncheon, and junket to keep her name in everyone's mouths and earn that nomination. It's not a coincidence that as she's become more open and available, she's also begun to work on more esteemed projects and earn more critical favor. There is a game to celebrity, and she is playing it. Most of them are. Sarah, do you think it's possible to be an actor, to revel in your quote unquote craft, and say no to fame? Because the thing that I always go back to is Bruce Willis taking his family to fucking Idaho to escape it all.
Yeah, I don't believe, Kristen, that she hates the fame. I'm not trying to, I think a lot of celebrities say that they don't like the fame when they secretly do. I don't think this is unique to her.
Yeah.
But I think that if you campaign for an Oscar is recognition, right? That's part of fame.
Exactly.
Anybody who campaigns for an Oscar wants to be famous. It's a certain type of fame. Maybe she would prefer Meryl Streep fame to Angelina Jolie fame, right? And they're both great actresses, but they're famous in a different way. So I believe that about her, but I don't believe that she doesn't want to be famous and adored. Also because while she does a lot of indie movies, she also, Spencer was very high profile. She didn't have to do a high profile movie. And then she did Charlie's Angels, right? That was designed to be a blockbuster popcorn movie that would be seen all around the world. So, and Happiest Season is also a delightful rom-com that was super accessible and streamed on Amazon, at least in Canada. So it's not like she's doing things that she thinks are only going to be seen in art houses. I think she wants to be more of a Charlize Theron than a Carrie Coon, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. It just annoys me when celebrities don't admit that.
Yeah, and she's made it her whole brand. And I find that really tough. And I think what's interesting is that since she's decided to be more candid and to play this fame game, I've found her to be much more appealing and to be more authentic, to be more mature. As you said, she's so eloquent about everything that she talks about. She's actually kind of quite pleasant to listen to. And I like her. And I didn't before. And that just shows that this is working, what she's doing. She's clearly got a media team who's coaching her on this. And I think it's fine. I think it's great. Just admit it. Don't pretend that that's not what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
Now, this brings us to our final segment. Hindsight is 2022, where we choose the one moment that we might have handled differently if we were the subject of this story.
I shouldn't have done that.
Sarah, what would that be for you?
I was Liberty Ross. I just wouldn't have moved for my husband's career. Like, I feel like moving for your husband's career, if it means giving up your own, is just never advisable because it creates a power imbalance in your marriage. It sets you up for failure. If you too can have a wonderful career where you're moving, like had he wanted to move to New York and she could have continued her modeling, that's fine, right? Like, support your partner. But just completely giving up everything to trail behind them, I think someone who loves you won't ask that of you, frankly. At least not for years at a time, not as a permanent move, maybe for a few months. But I also don't want to blame her because this is the same thing women are socialized to do all around the world, right? To put their husbands and their families first. So, like, obviously not her fault. I'm not blaming her for the fact that her husband cheated on her. I just wanted better for her than that. And she was always too good for him. Yeah. And had I been her friend, I would have said, like, listen, he proved that he wasn't good enough for you the moment he expected you to give up your fashion modeling career and move to LA. He can direct films in London. He could have directed films in New York. He doesn't have to move to LA. So, like, listen, know your worth.
Yes. Amen. Now, I have two demands. So, one, I want to know more about how the conversation between Rob and Reese went when she offered her house for his hideout.
I know.
I just want to know everything about that time. And number two, you brought this up earlier, actually. Why the hell is Howard Stern still the only quote-unquote journalist anyone feels comfortable opening up to? I can't grasp it. What does he pull out of these people?
She's famous enough for Oprah. Tell your secrets to Oprah.
Yes. Well, maybe it's because Oprah, it becomes a capital T thing. With Howard, it kind of disappears into a filthy abyss, and you only find it if you're looking for it. I don't know.
That's true, but only like his fans who are, not all of them, but a lot of them are kind of gross, are the people who hear your very articulate reflections.
Super gross. Anyway, future episode. And with that, we are at the end of this episode. Now, if you want to hear more from me, you can find me on Twitter at _Sadaf. Sarah, where can our listeners find you?
Listeners can find me at Sarah Sahagian. And if you liked this podcast, please rate, review, and subscribe so other listeners can find us too. Thanks for listening.